What is going on, boxing fans, fight fans, and bourbon fans, man? Welcome back to my show, Bourbon and Boxing. I'm your host, man. This is episode 43, baby. We're going to call this episode, what did I call it? Oh, yeah, Amazon set to go. PBC and Amazon set to go. There's some big news. A lot of boxing news landed today, man. A lot of big news for boxing. Some good fights set in place, and it looks like we might get a really good, amazing thing coming up from Prime and Amazon. We'll get more into that on the news side of things in the boxing. We also got two main events this week, baby. Two main events as boxing starts to get its wheels rolling for the year. We're going to be going into a big time February as we'll be ending January with two good main card fights, a couple good undercards. Fights on those cards also, man. Both are going to be on Saturday, and we're going to get an all-day boxing event, baby. You can't ever go wrong with all-day boxing, baby. That's why I love when they have it over over in Britain, and then they have a fight over here in the States, man, because over here in the U.S., that gives us all-day boxing. I don't know if that gives you guys all-day boxing over in the U.K., but that's what we get here, man, and I love that, man. I'll get off work just in time to catch probably midway through the very first event over in Liverpool. Nope, might not be Liverpool. Maybe that was last week, but I know we do have a fight in Britain this week. I'll get into that and much more, man. And I also have an amazing, amazing bourbon this week, man, that I'm really high on. I tried it earlier in the year. Of course, I tried the white label, the 1884 Nearest. This was before I was doing some bourbon reviews. So, I just get my bourbon. I'd get on here, drink it, not do much history about the bourbon itself. Well, now with my new segment, reviewing the bourbon every week, man, I like to break down, really set down, taste the bourbon, uh, and get a background story on every bourbon, a little bit of the history of it, how it was made, why it's so popular, give you guys my opinion on the taste, all that cool stuff, man. And I got a really, really good one this week, man. One that I'm looking forward to, Uncle Nearest, man. It has got not so much the history long term, but it definitely has a history in the name itself. This is a very historic bourbon as far as the name Uncle Nearest, man. We're gonna get into that as I break down the bourbon of the week for you. Like I said, we're gonna talk about those two main cards, and we're also gonna have a lot of boxing news, man. It's gonna be a great episode, man. Thank you for joining me. And before we get anything started, man, what do we like to do on bourbon and boxing? We like to take a shot of bourbon, and then we're gonna get this review going for you guys, man. Mm. All right, guys. Now, like I said, this bourbon that I have this week, Uncle Nearest, has a lot of history to it as far as the name. The name pretty much tells the whole entire story, man. Let's get into the classification, all that kind of stuff, a little information about the bourbon of the week. Uncle Nearest, 1856. Classification is whiskey. Company, Uncle Nearest. Proof 100. Distillery, unknown. It's five different distilleries help make this bourbon. Two in Nashville that are undisclosed, that can't be announced, according to the contract that they have with Weaver, the owner of the company. Also, it's an NAS, age, they think, at least 7 years. It's a mash bill, is also undisclosed, of course, being from different distilleries, all that kind of stuff. And we'll get more into that also about the undisclosedness, the five different locations and what they're doing about that to try to fix it on their end, in the process of actually building a distillery for themselves. So, not bad. Now let's get into the backstory of Uncle Nearest, man. Like I said, to understand Uncle Nearest, you first must understand the story behind the name, as it is the history of the whiskey. Nearest Green, legal name was Nathan Green, a black slave who taught Jack Daniels how to distill. This info was kept from the public till 2016 when a New York Times article by Clay Risen, bringing question, brought attention to it, and then everybody's like, "Hey, man, what's going on here?" It looks like, and then bringing question about Brown and Foreman integrity, the company that owns Jack Daniels. Of course, why would they keep this a secret? Especially once you get into the backstory, the history of the both of the families, the Greens and the Daniels, are very close family. Now, when you first hear that, hey, Jack Daniels has never really said anything. It took a guy from, the New York Times to write an article about it for the attention to be brought to it, for Jack Daniels to recognize the Green family as being part of the people that helped them get their business started. So, uh, but the more you read into it, man, it seems like Jasper Daniels, who was known as Jack Daniels, was very good friends with him and Nathan Green were really, really good friends as they both worked on the same farm. We say work, but Green was a slave and Daniels was a worker for the farm. He came in as a helper, handsman, as they call him, something like that. Helped out, but and then we'll get in more to that also. But let's jump into Fawn Weaver. She is the owner of Uncle Nearest, the company itself. Fawn Weaver, who was inspired by the article, decided to do more research in Nearest Green's story. She did a lot of work uncovering the story. Her work led to a book and a movie. Her discovery ultimately inspired the whiskey brand Uncle Nearest 1856. And if I'm correct, she's a black female and the owner of this company. And I mean, pretty inspiring what she's doing with it, and not just the whiskey itself, but helping to get the Green family recognized and Nathan Green recognized, and Uncle Nearest, as he was also known as, recognized for what he did in the bourbon industry, guys. Um, the history of Uncle Nearest is pretty much the untold story of Jack Daniels, who now embraces its past by honoring Nearest Green. Uncle Nearest is by honoring Nearest Green. Uncle Nearest is currently working with 5 different distilleries to help produce and process both its premium age original source and Tennessee Silver. Uh, Uncle Nearest puts the whiskey through a combination of two-step process to make it their own. So they got their own little way that they like to. They got their own little steps and little things they do at the end to make it their own whiskey. Even though they got 5 different distilleries making it, they still are allowed to put their own little niche onto it. The company has now started distilling, which currently takes place at Corsair Distill, while waiting for its new Nathan Green distillery to be finished. They have a distillery being built, and it's going to be called Nathan Green Distillery. Not for sure the location. Pretty sure it's going to be somewhere in Tennessee, as that's who they do majority of their companies with. Now they do the finishing part of it in Kentucky, but they started out down in Tennessee to get sent up to Kentucky to be finished up. Pretty good story behind that. But man, let's get to the real story about this bourbon, guys. Now, I held it off in the beginning, man, but it's a really cool story, man. I like it a lot. And in the beginning, it sounds like Jack Daniels did this guy wrong, but I don't think it was so much Jasper Daniels, aka Jack Daniels, that did Nathan Green wrong. I think it was just somehow it was lost in history, even though the Green family has been part of the Jack Daniels family for a really, really long time. When you look at the history of their family working there and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know how it was really never, they were really never honored for, helping get the company going. But let's get into it, man. Tell you who Uncle Nearest Nathan Green is, guys. Who Nearest Green, he was known by his family and his friends as Nearest Green, guys. So Uncle Nearest Premium Whiskey honors the first black master distiller, Nathan Green. He was the first to use charcoal to filter his whiskey. In the mid 1800s, he began to work on a farm where he was a slave uh, under Dan Call, also a reverend known as Reverend Call. Call can Call came aside a business. Call ran a side business running whiskey. Green was his master distiller. This is also where Green met a young man by the name of Jack Daniels, Jasper Daniels, who Dan Call asked Nearest to take under his wing, which he did, showing him everything he knew about being a master distiller, showed him how to pretty much do the whiskey. He took Jasper. Jasper came in as a handsman. He wasn't looking for a handout or anything. He wasn't one of those privileged type of people or anything like that, man. He came in wanting to work on the farm, and what piqued his interest is he was trying to figure out what was going on up the hill. Seeing the donkeys run back and forth, the smoke coming off the hill. He was smelling the oak, all this kind of stuff. So, he was just trying to, hey, man, what is going on up there? I'm interested. I'm curious. What's going on? So Dan called, said, hey, let's go up here. I'll show you what's going on. And that's where he met Nathan Green, man. And they bonded and became really, really good friends. So it wasn't just a one-sided thing. Like, hey, Nathan was just giving him all this information and all that kind of stuff. So, it worked both ways for both of them, man, as far as, combining together, man, and working together. And Nathan really showing Jasper Daniels, the ropes. In 1865, the 13th Amendment was passed and slavery was ended soon after. Uh, you know, Nearest was released from Dan Call. So, uh, it wasn't long after that Jack Daniels purchased Dan Call's farm and distillery, and naming it after himself, of course, Jack Daniels Distillery. Of course, he asked his mentor and friend Nearest to be his first master distiller. Together, the two continued making great whiskey after years of working after years of working for Jack Daniels. Nearest retired. But his sons, Eli, George, and Lewis, that's where I said the history of their family continuing to work there. All three of his sons worked there. Eli, George, and Lewis continued to work for the distillery, as did his grandkids, Charlie and Doc, also worked for the company. So it wasn't like it was just, that's three generations of family working there. So how Jack Daniels could kind of sweep that under the rug is kind of curious to why they really hid that, especially being something historical you know, as far as we know in history, Nearest Green being one of the first black African American master distillers. So that's something you would think historically you would want to be part of your company, man, no doubt about it. But for some reason, it got lost in the woodwork, man. You know, that's pretty much the story behind it, man. But like I said, it's a little bit more than what it seems like. It seems like, Daniels and Green had a great relationship. They continued it for years and years. Now I know Jasper Daniels, Jack Daniels, he passed away around 1906, I think it was, from a weird toe injury from kicking a safe, and then he ended up passing away from some weird infection, just weird stuff like that. But overall, man, Uncle Nearest is by far definitely one of my favorite whiskeys ever. The 1884 brand blew me out of the water the very first time I tried it. I was just amazed by how smooth and it was. Now, the 1885 isn't as smooth as the 1884, but I'll tell you what, it has a better oak taste for me, and it has a little bit of a pop to it right away with the spice taste to it. And it has a nice little kick lingering afterwards, and it's good for sipping, especially once you chill it down, give it a little bit of swirl, let it set for a minute and breathe. It's a really great bourbon, guys. Really definitely enjoy Uncle Nearest, man. Let's tip this off to Uncle Nearest, and not only the history, but let's also tip our hats to a guy like Nathan Green, the first African American black distiller. So, master distiller at that. Oh, man. Just gotta really enjoy that. But like I said, man, in boxing this week, we have two main cards that we're going to break down for you. I'm going to talk about the early card first over in what time in Belfast, actually. Over in Belfast, we're going to talk about that card first. That main card is going to be Saturday, Lewis Crocker versus Jose Felix. Now, I remember Jose Felix. I don't know much about Crocker. I did watch him earlier in the year versus McKenna. I think that's who he fought, and that was a pretty good fight. I like what I saw from him. But Felix, what was his last name? Jose Felix. He was the guy who impressed me when he knocked out Gary McCauley over one of the undercard fights on the Katie Taylor fight, her first fight back over in Dublin. And Gary Colley, tall, Irish, linky guy. Jose Felix, kind of a shorter Spanish guy. And man, I tell you what, he quieted the crowd that night. I was really impressed with what I saw from him. So nice to see him back in the ring, man, especially being a main card event. Uh, and then he's going to have a tough one, though, against Lewis Crocker. I think that's going to be a tough little fight, man. Um, After seeing what Jose Felix did to Gary McCauley, he's not a guy that you can underestimate, man, but I'm going to favor Crocker in this fight. He's up and coming. He's trying to prove himself uh, in that fight, man. So I'm going to favor him in that, and that seems to have a nice little undercard under it, guys. Shavon Clark, who was an Olympic fighter, just in the Olympia, and I think 2022, 2023, one of those times, versus Tommy McCarthy, and then you're going to get Kona Walker versus Lloyd Germain, Patty Donovan, who I like a lot. Surprised that he's not the co-main event on this. I really like Patty Donovan. He's going to be facing Will Herrera, and then you're going to get Giorgio Vasili versus Samuel Fakiri, and then you're going to get Layla Budalagian. Butt licking is what it's. I promise you guys, if you sound it out, it kind of sounds like butt licking. Uh, Layli Budligan. I'm not making that up. Versus Artemo Sparta. Two really hard names for me to pronounce there, guys. I struggled with that big time, but I promise you it looks like Belta Liquor. And I didn't write it like butt liquor. I spelled it how it was. Buttigleg. Budagaleg. I don't know, man. Maybe somebody correct me on that. I don't know where she's from. But that's a nice little undercard, man. You're going to get that early over in the UK. I think here in the States, probably about a 1 or 2 o'clock start time. Over in the US for that, it's going to be over in Belfast. It's going to be on the Zone, is where you're going to catch that at. It's going to be the nice little undercard here in the US, man. We're not undercard, but nice little early fight that we're going to get, man. Going to entertain us with some boxing all the way up to about 5 or 6 o'clock, and then we're going to get the nightcap over here in the U.S., which the Zone is a little bit different than ESPN. ESPN usually might start around 6 or 7. The Zone's going to start about 8 o'clock. It's in Phoenix, Arizona, so they're going to be on West Coast time. So they're going to start around 8 o'clock for that fight. That's going to be in Phoenix, the Footprint Center of Phoenix, Arizona, guys. Of course, that's going to be a really good fight, man. Jaime Munguia versus John Ryder. I think I don't know. I'm 50-50 about John Ryder. Not super impressed. He's tough, but tough doesn't win fights, as he's lost 6 times in his career. 32-6 is what I think his record is. Uh, I don't know. I guess he's more like a journeyman at this point. He'll test Jaime a little bit, but after the fight that Jaime had with Derbinchenko, I don't know how much John Ryder can really pressure a guy once he's been in a fight like he was. That last fight Jaime had with Dermanchenko was just an all out war, man. He took some of the biggest hits I've ever seen him take in his career, but he came out on top in that fight, man, and he fought back really, really well, man. It was a really great fight. Could have possibly been fight of the year easily. Even though I didn't vote it as that, I still thought it was definitely one of the best fights of the year against Dermanchenko. Jaime came out on top. Now, I think he's going to come out in this fight a little bit more prepared and ready. And, after a tough fight like he had, I think he's just ready for anything at this point. He's like, what can John Ryder bring to me that Dermanchenko didn't already do? All right. Now, here's the thing, man. If Jaime Munguia can win this fight against John Ryder, he's possibly looking at an opportunity to fight Canelo, right? I don't agree with that because I think, Canelo's supposed to fight Charlo in May. And then, so if he decides to fight Jaime Munguia, he's not going to fight Jaime till September. We know that's when he likes to fight, May, September. Then he'll take the rest of the year off, right? So that pretty much tells us that we're not going to get uh, Benavidez and Canelo. Canelo's going to find every way he can to skip out on that fight. And I think what he's really trying to do, in my opinion, guys, I think Canelo's hoping that, Benavidez has no choice but to go fight David Morrell, who he doesn't want to fight. And he doesn't want to fight Benavidez. And he's hoping that he goes to fight David Morrell. Morrell beats him. And then Morrell, he's going to say, Morrell hasn't fought enough for me to fight him. He hasn't earned the right to fight a Canelo. And that's the excuse he'll use for David Morrell if he beats a David Benavidez, if that fight actually comes along, and that's what happens. So that's what I'm saying. Jaime's got a lot on the line here, which I still don't see. It's weird. I don't know if Canelo's going to work with Golden Boy. That's the thing. Jaime Munguia is with Golden Boy, and we know the history with Golden Boy and Canelo. So that fight is still, we're not for sure. I'm not saying that that's what's next for Jaime Munguia if he wins this fight, but there is an opportunity. It's been talked about for some reason, so maybe they know something we don't know. Maybe that's a fight he's decided he's going to take after he cherry picks the older Charlo brother, and then he's going to go fight Jaime Munguia, which I think is a good fight. That's not a bad fight, Jaime Munguia versus Canelo. That's a great fight. Jaime's a very entertaining fighter. I don't know, it's not the Benavidez versus Canelo fight that I want to see. And maybe that's why I downplay it a little bit, because it's not the fight I want to see and not the fight we want to see, not the mandatory that's on the table that should be happening. It's a fight that Canelo's just going to take. So, like I said, it's almost like a cherry picking type of situation. And I'm not saying Jaime McGee is a cherry picking type of guy. He's a great fighter, undefeated. Even though he hasn't really fought a lot of people, and his best test was Dermanchenko, which I thought he did a great job of taking that. I mean, he took, there's no, like, the thing with that in the Dermanchenko fight, if he took even a quarter of those type of open punches from a guy like Canelo, he'd probably get laid out. Even though I don't know, Canelo has lacked on knocking anybody out, so he might be losing his power. Which now he's just going to outbox you, which ends up just being boring fights, man. Am I the only one that thinks his last three fights were just absolutely horrendous? The Bivol fight, snoozer. The freaking Ryder fight, snoozer. The Charlo fight, snoozer. Like, he got a stop. Did he get a stoppage in that fight? I'm not even for sure because it was so fucking boring. You know what I mean? We knew that it was just a level above levels. Cherry picking, and why the hell he fought the younger Charlo brother is still beyond me. But without getting too much into that and forgetting about our main card with the Jaime McGee versus Sean Ryder, man, I think this is a really good fight. Not much to break down here, man. I think Jaime is a really aggressive style. Well, not really aggressive style. He's very patient. So he's going to let Ryder come to him, and he's just going to kind of set him up with counters. It's going to be the opposite of the fight that he just had with Dermanchenko. He's not going to be pressured so much. He's going to have time to be more calculated, set up his counters, and just watch out for a big punch from John Ryder, who that's pretty much what he has, if he's got anything left in the tank. I think if Ryder loses this fight, he's probably going to retire, in my opinion. And then if Jaime Munguia wins this fight, then he's going to get an opportunity at Canelo. From what I'm hearing, even though I still find it hard to believe that Golden Boy and Canelo are going to work together. Uh, all right. The undercard on that's going to have Oscar Calizo versus Ramirez Gutierrez. Then you're going to get Gabriela Pandora versus Christina Cruz. You're going to get Alan Romero versus Eric Ruiz. You're going to get Darius Bohum versus Altaz Fox. You're going to get Gregory Morales versus Ronel Ron. All right. Now, that's going to be the undercard for that fight, man. Like I said, that's all going to start at 8 o'clock over here in the U.S. It's going to be on DAZN also, so both main cards tomorrow are going to be on DAZN. So that one channel, simple and easy. Just stay there, stay tuned in all day, baby, because it's going to be all day boxing. My ear is itching. I feel like somebody is talking about me right now. It's probably my wife talking shit. Let's see. Oh, yep, there she is. She's saying hello to me. Let's see what she's got to say. Downstairs. We'll get over to some boxing news for you guys. All right, guys, let's get into some boxing news, man. There was a lot of news dropped today, man. I woke up, clicked into my usual networks, listened to a little podcasting and all that, and then found out some big news being dropped that Amazon and PBC have now announced when their first fight is going to be, March 30th. And initially, it was announced they just dropped the main card, which is Tim Tszyu versus Keith Thurman. And I'm not blown away from that fight, right? I'm like, man, that's an okay fight. So I really wasn't blown away by that fight, and I'm like, man, I hope they don't make it a pay per view. It's hard to sell a pay per view on your very first fight, especially if you're trying to introduce your audience to boxing, as Amazon might be trying to do with the new PBC contract. Now, for me, how I looked at that as not a pay-per-view fight, but then they slowly started to announce the undercard for it, which was pretty fast. I guess this is something they've had in talks for a minute, and they've been working out because they pretty much set this as March 30th. Tim Tszyu, it's a done deal. And now we've seen and heard this before, guys, and then to come to next week, it'll be two different fighters on March 30th. But with the way they introduced like the undercard and everything like that, it kind of seems like this is a set deal for PBC and Amazon to start their career or start their contract, start their relationship March 30th, guys. Tim Tszyu was announced on that. Um, Now the undercard also has Rolly Ramirez and Pitbull Cruz at 140. Now this is a weird fight because Ryan Garcia thought 100% sure he was going to get the Rolly Romero fight. Comes to find out that Rolly signed a contract with Pitbull Cruz, who is 135 pounds, if I'm correct. So I'm wondering if this is going to be a catch weight or anything, or Cruz is going to come up to 140 to fight Rolly for his belt. That's a pretty interesting undercard. I go, okay, now that makes that fight a little bit more interesting with Tszyu Thurman and then Rolly Romero and Pitbull Cruz on the undercard. But then it gets even better than that, guys. Sebastian Pandora, Pandora has been announced to be on the undercard of that also, which is pretty impressive. Somebody is talking my ear off, man. I'm telling you, my wife must be pissed at me right now. Uh, okay, whatever. But hey, yeah. My ear is burning, guys. Oh, you know what they say when your ear is burning? You must take a shot of whiskey. Yeah. Oh, man. If it burns, it's working, man. Uh, Also, today, the Better Be versus Baval date was set for June 1st in Saudi Arabia. Uh, I guess these guys have agreed to fight each other, which is going to be another great fight to add to the card. I mean, you're going to get Tim Tszyu, Keith Thurman with a great undercard. That's going to be happening in March. June 1st, you're going to get that. Of course, a Better Be versus Baval fight, according to what's being said here and announced today. And then, of course, we're going to get boxing's going to get rolling more and more. As February comes along, we're going to get our heavyweight undisputed fight. We're also going to get, and are we going to get at cruiserweight an undisputed cruiserweight fight? I'm not sure, but I know there's a cruiserweight fight coming up with Opatia, which is going to be on the Anthony Joshua and Gane fight. So boxing seems to be getting its wheels going. It's rolling, baby. It's starting to get a little bit better. We're picking up. We're getting two main cards this week. Hopefully next week we'll get, a couple more main cards, all that kind of fun stuff, man. But let's see if we got any more news for you guys. Of course, yeah. The one news that we got, of course, was the Rolly news, which throws a monkey wrench into Ryan Garcia's plans, who absolutely was hell bent that he was going to fight Rolly Romero. Now, this is the one thing I would tell Ryan Garcia is that when you're with a promotional company, you don't make all the calls. He was hell bent. They probably could have got that Haney fight done. Haney was on board for it. Oscar was in the works with it. He had told Oscar to go ahead with it. That fight probably could have been done and set by this point, I would think, in my opinion. But Ryan, for some reason, backed off that. I don't know. Floyd told him that there's no way you're going to beat Devin Haney, or that's not the fight to take right now. So he backed out of that and was hell bent that he wanted the Rolly Romero fight. He wanted to go after him for his belt. Now that has also been off the table. Now I don't know if you can go back to negotiating with Haney, who doesn't have any opposition on the table right now. Now I did hear some crazy stuff that he said that he would fight Subaru Mateus, but his father was asking for a rehydration clause. How I hope that's not true because that's kind of that's weak, man. Like you're both at 140, you both have belts. No reason you should be asking for it. Anybody should be asking for a rehydration clause. It should be Subaru Mateus after seeing that you came in at 168 in your last fight, dude. Like you came in huge at one. You're a 140 fighter and you came in that fight at 165, 168, something like that. Crazy ass weight. So if anybody should ask for a rehydration clause, I would think Subaru Mateus would ask for that. I don't even know why you would entertain a rehydration clause when you're both at 140 right now. That would be stupid. He knows. I think that's a way of him not taking a Subaru Mateus fight. Right now, he doesn't have much on the table. I would think him and Teo would match up at 140, the best at 140, but I don't see that happening. I think Teo wants the Crawford fight, and he has options to take that. The Devin and Teo fight would be a huge fight. Of course, I think the Subaru and Mateus versus Devin fight would be a huge fight also. But now you got Ryan in limbo. What's Ryan going to do at this moment? I think he's going to be forced to take the Ramirez fight, who just signed with Golden Boy. And I think they want to match him up against Ryan because I really think that Golden Boy and Oscar De La Hoya, they want Ryan to lose. And I think they favor Ramirez in that fight. I would actually favor Ramirez in that fight also. In my opinion, maybe Ryan would surprise me, and I'd be a little bit surprised by him. But I think I would favor Ramirez in that fight, and I think Golden Boy wants to match him up against somebody they think is going to beat him, like Devin. And they just wanted the money from that fight. I think they knew that in their mind, almost like the Tank fight, that Ryan doesn't have a chance to win that fight. And don't get me wrong, they both fight in the amateurs 6 times, if I'm correct, and it was supposedly split 3-3. So maybe, but I think, like I said, Ryan hasn't developed much since the amateurs. We've seen Devin definitely develop into an incredible fighter since the amateurs. Develop his game a lot more, add arsenals to add what he's already got in his arsenal. Just an incredible fighter. I don't think we've seen Ryan grow like that. His growth has been very slow. Hopefully, Derek James is able to bring it out of him. We saw a little bit in his last fight against Oscar Duarte, where he was doing a weird shoulder roll, all that kind of stuff. But once Derek got it in his head to stop doing that, and approaching the way Derek wanted him to, then we saw the fight and pretty handily, because he does have a nice left on him, and he's got boxing skills. It's not like he's not a good boxer. He is a good boxer. But what's next for him out there, man? He might be stuck with Ramirez, who Golden Boy has right now, and they need to make a fight for. And why not a big fight like Ryan Garcia, guys? But man, anyways, that's not much news I got for you guys today. Like I said, some big time announcements. Amazon March 30th they have a fight set with Tim Tszyu and Keith Thurman in the undercard. It's just absolutely unbelievable. Go check out that. See who all is on the undercard. It's pretty impressive. Rolly, Pitbull, Sebastian Fedora back on the card. Nice to see him back in the ring. So nice fight set up on that undercard to make it a nice pay-per-view for the opening of Amazon Prime Boxing with PBC. Like I said, Netflix is also in talks with MVP Promotions. They're trying to bring live sports streaming to Netflix. I've heard a couple other rumors involved in this right before. I know they were in talks trying to get the PBC contract. They were like the underdog right there underneath Amazon Prime, who just outbid them by a little bit. People don't realize how close they were to actually getting that PBC contract. If they would have came in earlier, I think they would have had a better chance. But I think Prime swooped in immediately to take that opportunity. There was really no looking back after that with how many subscribers Prime has. It was kind of a no-brainer once they approached it. Yeah, we're going to take that deal. They got the money, they got the subscribers, and they got the platform. But I'd like to see Netflix get into some MVP boxing. I think MVP puts on some good fights. If I'm correct, that is Jake Paul promotional company, what he's part of, all that kind of stuff. But they always do put on some pretty decent cards outside of his fights. All the other fights are pretty good. But like I said, man, not much other news to give you guys, man. We got some great news with the Tim Tszyu, Keith Thurman fight. We got some great news with Better Be versus Bivol being set for June 1st. So we know this year we're slowly getting the fights we want. Now, what is on the table for Terrence Crawford? Before I jump off here, I do remember that, who was it? That Tim Tszyu is now off the table for Crawford. He could still fight Virgil Ortiz, in my opinion. Boots Ennis is mandatory. Teofimo Lopez has talked about interest in moving up to fight Crawford, which I think that's a big time money fight and very entertaining fight. So he has more options on the table. I think he could move to 154 and fight Charlo. And then how long is he going to wait to fight? That's the biggest question, guys. Because if he's not going to fight till midsummer, then why not do the Spence rematch? He'll be ready by midsummer, I would think, August. Maybe late summer, August. Get that fight going. So if he's only going to fight once this year, and he's not going to do it till later in the year, you might as well line up that Spence rematch and go ahead and get that at 150. I'd like to see it at 154 or make a fight with Charlo. There are options out there for Crawford, man. Even if you take Virgil Ortiz, or not Virgil, but you take Tim Tszyu off the table and you take Canelo off the table, he said he's not interested in that fight. So if you take those two guys off the table, there's still plenty of options for Terrence Crawford out there, man. And I would like to see him take his mandatory against Boots Ennis. I think that would be a great fight. But like I said, Teo moving up would be a great fight. He's got plenty of options, guys. Not really worried about that. I don't think he is either. But like I said, man, thank you guys for joining me for another episode of Bourbon and Boxing. I hope you guys enjoyed this one, man, as we got to review a very historical bourbon and Uncle Nearest, not just the name itself, but everything about it, man. It's an unbelievable bourbon, man. It's very, very special, man. The history behind it, like I said, being the very first African American master distiller and all that kind of stuff, man. You guys, not just that, but the bourbon itself is unbelievably good, man. This is the 1885 100 proof. Very smooth, very oaky, got a nice little spicy taste, man. Very good. So it's not just the name behind the bourbon. There's my woman. But not just the name behind it, but just the history behind the name of the whiskey. And it's good whiskey, man. So give it a try. And you guys join me next time for another episode of Bourbon and Boxing, as I'm going to kill my wife before I get off here. But like I said, thank you guys for joining me for episode 43. Tune in tomorrow around noon when I drop it. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like. Also, check me out on Spotify, iHeart, Amazon Radio. Also, check my group out on Facebook, man. Like, subscribe, and thanks for joining me once again.